are the part that go into the spinal cord. So the terminal branches of a sensory neuron are inside the spinal cord. The dendrites of the central nervous system are the ones that are in our muscles. If we're talking specifically about muscle sensory fibers, which is the exact opposite of the motor neurons, right? We said the terminal branches of the motor neuron were in our muscles, and the dendrites were inside the spinal cord. And why that is because in the muscle, this is our receptor. Dendrites are always a receptor. They're a receptor in our motor neurons, and they're a receptor in our sensory neurons. But we want our receptors in the peripherals, right? When I step on a nail, I want a receptor there that sends the information up to the spinal cord, terminates in the spinal cord, and articulates with the receptors of the motor neuron. So the terminal branches of a sensory neuron synapse with the dendrites of the motor neuron. Because then the dendrites of the motor neuron, which are the receptors, which are receiving the information from the sensory neuron, then send the information down out to that foot and go into the terminal branches of its motor neuron, which connect to the muscle, and the muscle says, go away from the pain. So they're the opposite of each other, but logically it should make sense. We want the receptors of sensory in the peripheral that go into the brain or the spinal cord tell the dendrites of the motor neuron to send some information down to its terminal branches to tell the muscle that are connected to that terminal branches to move or do something to get away from pain. Yeah? It's just a nice little pathway. Okay, so we don't always have a direct synapse between a sensory terminal branch to the dendrites of a motor neuron. Sometimes in the spinal cord, where the dendrites of the motor neuron are and the terminal branches of the sensory neuron are, sometimes there's connector neurons. They're just they just connect. If these guys are too far away from each other, if they're not located in the same area within the spinal cord level, they have connector neurons. There could be one connector neuron, or there could be like 100 connector neurons in between a motor and a sensory. It's just a way that it's another pathway, a highway of trying to get the information across like a distance that's farther apart. They're just connecting links. There could be a single neuron connecting to a sensory neuron. There could be a direct sensory to motor, or there could be connector neurons in between. Connector neurons are only in the central nervous system. They're not in the peripheral at all. They're only located in your brain and your spinal cord. There's an intricate system of neurons where sensory impulses may relate to many different neurons. So if sensory information is coming up into your brain, it can be sent multiple different directions. It doesn't go, a 1-to-1. It could go 1 out to 1,000 through these different means of connector neurons or different articulations. And we'll talk about this more in a minute. There could be thousands of different connections between our neurons. So we need information to go. We're very complicated human beings, right? We have very intricate ways we have to move ourselves. So information goes thousands and thousands of different ways. Okay, so a nerve is the bundling of motor neurons and sensory neurons. Other neurons, too, that we don't talk about in this class. There's neurons that go to your intestines, right? There's neurons that go all over the place. But for us, when we're talking about a nerve, and we'll show what one looks like in a minute, a nerve is a bundling of all of this motor neurons and all of these sensory neurons together, and they're wrapped in connective tissue. They keep them together. So when you sever a nerve, what that means is, when you sever that, the motor and the sensory little pieces of spaghetti, splay out everywhere. And you disconnect their connection to wherever information is coming in or out of. So when you sever a nerve, not only do you lose information coming in, you lose the ability to send information out. Motor, out, sensory, in. This is the nerve. Okay, so let's look at this. This is our anterior horn. What's situated there? Please, let's quiz ourselves. Where was this?
Motor.
What's in? Sorry. So what's in here? Motor.
No.
What part of the motor neuron?
Cell body.
The cell body, right?
Oh.
Cell bodies, right? Cell bodies and then the dendrites, right? What comes out here?
The axon.
That's the axon. And what is this called? Ventral root or anterior root, depending on what book you're reading. This is where the axon comes out of, and it's going to come right into here. Now, sensory is coming in. What's right here? It's called the dorsal root ganglion. What's in there?
Sensory.
The cell body of the sensory neuron. The axon comes in through the nerve. We have the cell body here. What comes out through here? It goes in there? No, dendrites are down here for sensory. It's split. Dendrites are here for motor. Dendrites are down here for sensory. Terminals were down here for motor. What was up here? Terminals. They're opposites. Right? Terminals, dendrites. This is, so we have the cell body. It has this little axon that comes in, and this is its terminating branches. And then somewhere in here, there could be a connector neuron that's connecting this terminal branch to this dendrite. Right? Terminal branch to dendrite. Right here is where they are bound together, and that's a nerve. So nerves go to certain areas. You have sensory and motor neurons to your arm. They're bound together in the same nerve. They're linked together in the same nerve. They go to the same place. The ones that are picking up the information from that muscle are bound together with the same motor neurons that are sending information to that muscle. Each spinal nerve is attached at the spinal cord through an anterior root or posterior root. Motor is the anterior quadrant. Sensory is your posterior quadrant. So information comes in through the back and out through the front. The posterior root bears the ganglion, the collection of the cell bodies of the sensory neuron. Okay, 31 pairs on either side. You have 8 cervical coming out of your cervical spine. We have 12 thoracic. We have 5 lumbar, 5 sacral, and 1 coccyx. So this is pretty much our upper body, and this is all lower body control. So this is the difference between. Have you ever had? You heard about different types of spinal injuries? Paraplegic versus a quadriplegic. What's the difference?
Can't use 2 limbs
Yeah.
versus all.
All right, and so where's the level of the sever of the spinal cord? Where does it happen? When you lose your upper body control, usually it's occurring at the cervical level. You have some type of severing at the cervical level, so you lose your upper body control. Now, if that's still intact and you get some type of sever more at the lumbar level, you still have all control of your upper body because those nerves are still intact. So it's a difference, and this is just for your own information and trying to connect what this means. If you've heard of somebody who's had these different types of levels of spinal injury, you get different levels of injury to your appendicular skeleton based off of what nerves that got injured. Because these are this is your way that you connect your brain to your hand. Okay, if you would like an outline of these, this is in the reading in table 4.1, it will tell you exactly what these nerves are. They have names, like radial nerve is the one that I know because both mine are impinged on my shoulders. Radial nerves. You have nerves that go and they'll tell you exactly what they control, if that's something you're interested in.